activities.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening to those of us that are not in the US. Very happy to be here with everybody. This is the July instance of our monthly meeting for the Medical XR Advisory Council. We're very fortunate to have two guests today. The one is our speaker, Shafi Ahmed, Dr. Shafi Ahmed, the professor, and probably he doesn't need a full introduction because everybody is a little bit familiar with his groundbreaking work. And we also have Dr. Kahana with us today. He's an advisor, a new advisor to XRSI. We'll hear from him a little bit maybe later if that's a possibility. Dr. Ahmed, go ahead, please.
Sure. Okay. I'm not sure how long I've got, Rachel, but I've got a little presentation which I'll go through if that's okay with you. Hi, Kavya. How
Oh, yes.
I'm just going to share my screen. And here we go. That's today. So I thought what I'd do is just share a few snippets of my journey so far in XR and a few of the things that we've been trying out through the various companies and roles that I have in XR. So we go back probably about a decade now, so almost 2014-15. You recall that the Oculus headset was on Kickstarter as a kind of new hardware after many years. And the Kickstarter raised a lot of money, which, as you know, was sold subsequently to Facebook and now Meta. And so at that point, I was grappling with some of the challenges in healthcare. So my background is I'm a colorectal cancer surgeon, a laparoscopic surgeon. I spent 3 decades in healthcare. Now, of course, in healthcare, you meet a lot of challenges. You meet difficulties of efficiency and particularly of training. And I have a huge interest in education and training. And I felt that we could do better than what was convention. And I really felt that we should be moving from analog to digital. It was a bright concept. And I guess at that point, around 2014, the technology started becoming more available, whether it was Google Glass, whether it was VR headsets. It was suddenly beginning to become more available in terms of the access from various companies. So I felt that we should be disrupting that space. And so the first thing we did, of course, is the number of operations, live transmissions using various smart glasses. And then we move into VR. Initially, I was using AR as a device. I guess Google Glass can be loosely called AR, if that's what it is, but certainly way ahead of its time back in 2014. I did the first operation using Google Glass on a global level. But I thought it was more important to have people next to you in the OR, bring them to you in a crowded OR where they could get more training. And so we did the world's first VR surgery. And if you go back in those days, it's very easy now to create a 360 video. You get a camera, you click it, it all works seamlessly. In those days, there was no such thing. We had to literally get a bunch of GoPro cameras, put them to housing, and then record the elements. Then we got our graphic designer who spent a week stitching it together. Can you imagine? To do one of the very first videos in VR. And now, of course, one click, it's all fused together with no ghosting, etc. So that's the kind of thing we were facing, the challenges. Then we thought, could we broadcast this on a new platform to reach as many people as possible? So we did the first VR surgery. Now, I'm sure you've all seen this, but I'll share the video with you nonetheless.
This 360 camera rig allows immersion. People around the world using a low-cost technology, a simple VR headset, actually immerse themselves in operating theatre around the world.
Can you hear the audio on that one, by the way? Did you hear the audio? Okay, great. I'm just checking. Sometimes I forget to click the audio button. So that was a concept, right? And it kind of captured the imagination of the world. It was the first time it was done. It was transmitted across the world. And I think something like 55,000 people watched the operation live. It still remains one of the biggest kind of exercises in kind of virtual reality, although it's more 360 than virtual reality if you're thinking about being very discreet with the terminology. What it showed me that using like a Google Cardboard at that time, using a smartphone, an app that we'd built that was free, you could really democratize education. It's the first time I thought about how we connect people around the world globally for the greater good. And so this was an example of what we did, and it's got great traction, of course, around the world. We then decided to form a company, going from, we did some work with Google Glass at the beginning of AR, with virtual medics, a small company that ran, onto medical realities, which was the virtual reality and XR company that I run today. And so if you look at where we've come from that, we went around the world recording lots of surgical operations. We've been to India, to Bangladesh, to the US, of course, Italy, Valentino, and UK and Middle East, and Africa now as well. We've sent some work in Africa, parts of Africa where there's low access to surgical training. And so what we're creating now is a whole kind of whole series of solutions. We're kind of thinking, what does XR training look like with simulation, with interactive VR videos, holographs and medical assets, anatomy and 3D assets, and an advanced patient consultation engine to teach communication skills and understanding diagnostic abilities. So we now moved on to a greater level. 3 or 4 years ago, before the pandemic, for example, XR was still in its infancy in terms of adoption around the world. It's still hardware driven. The content wasn't ripe enough. The pandemic has now actually accelerated people's mindsets, and now we can inundate it with hospitals, universities, colleges, etc., who are keen on looking at remote learning. Obviously, we've been using Teams and Zoom, and now XRSI is offering that extra capability to augment current training modules. So we're in a good space, I think, and the investments into VR is amazing at the moment. People are doing lots of good work and showcasing the efficacy of that. So that's kind of what we're planning on doing. I'm going to show you the next video of kind of where we are today in that very first operation that you saw earlier.
Hi, Celia.
Oh, hi, Professor. Thanks for meeting me like this.
Preset pressure of 14 millimeters of mercury and proceed to do a diagnostic now.
I hear people talking about me.
Okay. And do you recognize the voices? Who is it that's talking to you?
I don't know. 3. There's 3 of them.
What kind of things do they say?
They keep saying that if Josh had any sense, he'd take Jack away from me for good.
So what you saw there really, for me, was a kind of a journey where we are over the last 7-8 years, from basic rudimentary 360 video now into a world of avatars, conversation engines, AI, for example, as well as creating CGI simulation and kind of advanced medical training. So that's a kind of long journey. And now we've seen the fact that this is of value. If you look at some of the studies done already, it shows that for surgery especially, if you train in VR, you improve by 270%. That's a company called Osso VR who's doing orthopedic training. And if you look at the reports by the Mazer report and the PwC report, it shows that learning is 80% better in immersive with immersive technologies. So we've seen the value, we've seen the validation, we've seen the adoption, the translation, and a kind of a wide use cases and content being produced. So I think we're in a happy place after a long time. It was very tough for us at the beginning because obviously we're way before the curve, and we had to persuade people that XR was going to be something transformative. And thankfully, it's come around now where we've shown that the XR is here to stay. The other thing that's, of course, very useful in XR is XR therapy, VR therapy. Virtual medicine is really going to transform healthcare going forward because it offers an alternative to conventional medicines and tablets, etc. So I think those two in parallel have actually made XR something that's going to be staying with us for long term. People talk about the metaverse, and of course, Facebook have tried to own the whole world of meta, but a lot of us have been thinking about the metaverse for a long time, thinking, how do we collaborate? And my whole vision around healthcare was that the doctors, like myself, were just too expensive to be face-to-face. We can no longer afford the luxury of seeing someone face-to-face. I always thought I should be more virtual. I spent the last decade thinking, how do I create avatars, holograms? How do I transport myself in a different way? And so I've been using holoportation, giving talks as an avatar and hologram for many years. And this was back in 2017, where I realized that remote care or remoteness was going to be important going forward, given the constraints of healthcare and resources, particularly in other countries around the world that have low income. So this is an example of what I called the surgical metaverse. I really am annoyed I didn't actually trademark that whole term about 6-7 years ago. So this was in 2017. That's my avatar in a platform called Beam, and it's an American company who created this remote collaborative platform. That was early with the kind of the blue polygonal representations of human beings. So what we did then was we created my own avatars and things. We experimented with photogrammetry very early on about creating digital humans and digital twins and thinking, how do we create this? And of course, we've seen many companies now producing lifelike replications, and Unreal Engine 5 with the MetaHuman is kind of where we're heading towards, with extremely photoreal images of these. And so what I did in that time in 2017, in November of 2017, I decided that I'd collaborate with surgeons across the world. I was in London. I had surgeons in India at the Tata Memorial, in Mumbai, and also a surgeon in the US. I thought, can I connect with these people in real time in my operating theatre or operating room, as you might call it in the US? So for example, if you need help from somebody, you're in trouble, could you collaborate? Rather like a multi-disciplinary team meeting that we have routinely now. And this is what we did in 2017.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Sophie. So the HoloLens itself really allows us to reshape the way we connect people, we communicate with people, and also to be used in teaching and training. Initially, when you put the HoloLens on, it feels a bit strange, but actually within a few minutes, it becomes quite normal. You feel as though you're just discussing cases with people in the same room, for example, like we do in normal hospital practice.
We can come in and actually look at this content in full 3D. And obviously when you're working in this case, the medical field, having a full 3D understanding of a situation, for example, is really much more powerful in solidifying how you want to navigate it in your mind.
So what you can see there, of course, is there's early renditions of remote collaboration in VR, essentially, where you have an avatar, you can communicate, connect, you can share assets. And then we moved on to kind of holograms and other platforms. On top left, you see my hologram that was produced by Double Me. And what they created was my own hologram using 5G technology, so we could transport ourselves. I think one of the furthest earliest kind of examples of holoportation. Still early in those days, it was very rudimentary, but things obviously much better now. And of course, now you've seen the explosion of kind of these tools. This is Beam on the top right, much better. Now it's more human-like. There's arm movements, eye recognition, mouth movements, sync, etc. You've seen Engage VR and the other kind of platforms used for meetings and collaboration. And of course, Spatial IO is also another platform that you've seen where you can actually now communicate and connect. So we're seeing a deluge of platforms in this whole space. And I think it does kind of fit the kind of void from having face-to-face in real life interactions to online Zoom and Teams, and something more that we need as humans. I've certainly realized in the pandemic that online and Zoom is okay, it's limited. There has to be some happy medium where there's an alternative to be able to see people face-to-face. Maybe that's one of the options. If you fast forward to just earlier this year in Arab Health, this is going forward, not just on the VR headset, it's on all the devices, whether it's Magic Leap or HoloLens or VR headsets, also on a smartphone. So I think one of the things we have to think about is smartphone access. When I was teaching at medical school, I gave my students options. I taught in the metaverse last year for the first time at Queen Mary, which was quite disruptive. I gave the students the option to join on a smartphone or a laptop, computer, PC, or indeed a VR headset, and to ensure that we weren't leaving anyone behind, because there's a divide there, and the barrier to entry, of course, is the VR headset. So here in Dubai, I was presenting Arab Health, and I was just teaching, for example, on acute appendicitis. I was joined by 8 other people from 8 different parts of the world in real time. Some were on their smartphone in the airport, waiting in the lounge. Others were, walking in the park. Others were in the offices. So we just showed that we could do it immediately. And this was what we did in Arab Health, just based on a 3G signal on a smartphone. I was wearing the HoloLens.
Around the tissues of the appendix.
Okay. So he's explaining the CT shows a 6 centimeter area of inflammation, and you can see the tip of the appendix. So he's now showing me what the image shows. That's fine. Thanks, Guillermo. Can we get rid of the images now? Thank you.
So that was Guillermo, who's actually a radiologist who was commentating on the scans from Mexico. So it shows you that kind of the collaboration that can happen, and actually is possible. At the medical school during the pandemic, of course, we realized we couldn't go face-to-face because of COVID. The students had a poor experience because they were on the front line and not really seeing any clinical patients as such. So I took the ward around to them. This was me on HoloLens on the ward. I brought my students into the lecture theatre. This is our bottom left at Bart's Medical School. There's 400 seats there. We brought them in 70 at a time. There was social distance, and we had a moderator in lecture theatres. There was kind of a connection with the ward around the patients, and they could interact with those patients and take histories and see me examine patients.
Anastomosis. And so what's happened is that sometimes with this staple line by the pancreas, you get leaking of fluid, the pancreatic fluid, and that's what you're seeing on the drain. And the drain helps evacuate it without accumulating.
So I think it was kind of having those tools available to be able to disrupt and teach them in a different way. And I think the pandemic, as I said before, made us more ready about remote learning. Thankfully, we've been using it for a while, so it wasn't a big change for us. Others, I suspect, had difficulty in getting clinical placements or clinical experience to their students. We then fast forward, and I thought, let's launch something else. Can we launch proper virtual training? And I called the concept the Metaversity. So what we're doing now with one of my companies is building an education platform. We're currently using the Engage, but we're building others around it, around experiences in this space. This is like, and what you understand is, what does learning look like in VR? It can't just be a classroom with people, because that just replicates what we have today. I think it's about having rich, immersive experiences. This is one of them, for example. We can see this is for mental health, it's for well-being, and it's for someone who wants to navigate through this world where they can find some solace and improve their mental health and in mood. So think about what those experiences look like in this virtual space. And this is the kind of examples we're working on. And this is the metaverse itself. And we create a building. Is the building the correct way of doing things? I actually don't know. Do we need to replicate what life is like in the real world? We want this seamless approach to physical and digital, of course, but do we need to move away from this kind of building? We're trying to build something that hopefully is more enticing and adds value to a learning experience. This is very much like some of the engaged things you've seen already or other platforms, but I think we can create these experiences that are rich, but also have people access them from around the world. The last bit I'm going to talk to you about is, of course, is that real future that we were talking about, and it's been a term that's thrown about a lot at the moment in the press through investment campaigns, etc. And that, of course, is the whole metaverse concept. And of course, you all know about this, and you're experts in the field, and XRSI is a great, I guess, organization that's going to help all of us develop the right standards going forward. So I was appointed quite a few months ago, but I announced it just a few weeks ago, the Chief Medical Metaverse Officer, which is an unusual title, but I take it as an interesting title. And what we're doing at iMedis Avalon is building the world's first healthcare city in the metaverse. People talk about the metaverse, and you've got Decentraland, and you've got coins and tokenization, etc. But we're trying to understand, what does healthcare look like? How do we build it with our partners? It's not about us, it's about partnerships with various companies around the world, trying to figure this one out. And so I think we're trying to think about what that metaverse for healthcare could offer. And so we're trying to build the biggest space in the area, and trying to get as many people involved, and healthcare providers, major pharma companies, for example, etc., hospital chains, all included, to figure this one out between us. And we're building those worlds as we speak. I think we're the furthest company in healthcare by a long shot. We're well into understanding what this might be and building the blocks for this future healthcare metaverse. And so you might understand, what does it look like? Well, actually, we're building on Unreal Engine 5, which is really incredible graphics compared to the others, and Unreal Engine 4 and Unity, to give you more of a photoreal representation of that digital world. And this is an example of this. So some of our buildings I'll show at some stage, and they look amazing, and I'm really happy with kind of the environments we're creating for our partners. So what can we offer? Well, we need to discover that. We've got to find out. We think, of course, there's that immersive interaction, which I think is important, as suggested earlier, from face-to-face to online platforms. This is another, I guess, direction for us to go in, which I think fills that gap between face-to-face and online platforms. We can obviously see people, talk to people, hopefully in the future, some virtual checkups, maybe even virtual treatments, particularly management of some of the chronic diseases. And chronic disease management is a huge burden of any healthcare system. In the UK, the chronic disease expenses form about 60 to 70% of the entire budget for our healthcare system in the UK. So it's a big one to think about. Can we connect people? We've seen the new headsets, haven't we, that are now connected with MTech, for example, have sensors in their wearables, for example, in the headset. Maybe having all those connections might be able to monitor the biometrics of a patient using these in VR. And of course, the expanding accessibility, we call it, is about how do we connect people everywhere around the world with poor infrastructure, and give them, hopefully, world-class treatment, or at least care that's affordable and accessible. We've got many companies already signed up to our platform, Novartis, Sanofi, big hospital chains, etc. And we're powering through, understanding what their needs are and how we work through them. It's about collaboration. You can't create this whole metaverse without collaborating with the right partnerships and learning together. We'll make mistakes, we'll understand it better. And I think it's where XRSI can help us enormously understand the landscape to ensure that what we're doing is safe and efficient for the patient. Ultimately, whatever we do with education or training or running healthcare metaverse, it's about improving safety for the patients, improving accessibility, and to improve outcomes. It has to be fundamental things that we do. So the other thing to think about is, okay, if we build it, what are the features that will support a safe system? So our platform is, of course, GDPR and HIPAA compliant. We made sure that at the beginning. It's a medical product and it's got CE certification already. We've got all the ISO certifications. It's based on HL7 FHIR compatibility, and of course available in different languages, and also both on the web, on an app, and of course on a VR headset. As I mentioned earlier, it's about accessibility. So we try to understand what might be required for an end user and to ensure that we're compliant. You can see our white paper from the website iemedis.io, and you can download all of our work that we've done so far in understanding what does that look like in terms of a 3D world with complete healthcare economy. And it's building an economy. That's the key. It's not just building experience, it's how to build economy. And so we think these are the people that might be involved, that we're trying to work with, so that we create that whole economy in the healthcare metaverse. We've been quite lucky. We've launched our first land sale 2 months ago, part 1, and we launched Dubai, Singapore, and we sold blocks purchased in these parts of the world, as was Lausanne, and Tokyo is coming up. So these were early companies who want to have space and to work out with us what that space could look like. And our land sale part 2 is commencing in a couple of weeks' time, so be aware of that. And this is an invitation only for people. So we invited people who want to come along and work with us, who are enthusiastic about the world that we're building. The other thing, of course, is if you build an economy, you have to build the marketplace, the tokenization. So we built our own data exchange, and we've got an NFT marketplace. I think one of the key elements is about data. Data is obviously a very important concept in the real world, and it has its limitations, of course. We think and we believe that with data and NFTs for patients, it might be the right way forward because they have more control, it's more secure, and of course it can be monetized and can be used by various agents. I think that's the way I think most people will talk about business model going forward, and what does healthcare offer? Can you actually use the data in a more profound way? I've been disappointed with how economies and healthcare systems have approached access to patient data. I just think we need to be honest, have a conversation with them, and to then accept that some people share the data openly and honestly, and others may not, but give people option. And we need to have that adult conversation about data. But I think that maybe this whole tokenization and understand the NFT marketplace might help us understand that better. So if you look at the kind of how we've approached these issues, on the left, you'll see the NFT marketplace and the metaverse, and how we're kind of creating some transparency, some reducing risk, trying to create depersonalized and anonymous kind of data that's traceable and immutable. And hopefully we can create further efficiency with no data loss. So we are thinking about how those two come together. How does that create a viable healthcare system? And of course, we mentioned about monetizing data. Is that possible? Maybe it is. We'll try and work it out, what it looks like. And iemedis have been selling data to pharma companies for a long while in terms of supporting them, access data, using it for the benefit of patients. Maybe this is going to be the next step for us. And of course, we have the, this is our asset type. And we've already launched that token a while ago, and it's in the marketplace for a while. And despite the kind of cryptocurrency problems we have at the moment, we hopefully that will show us how to incentivize people as we go forward. How would you use the tokens? Well, that's going to be important. It's going to be for research, to get data, of course. It's going to be for trial participation, makes sense. Maybe you can incentivize people for that. For payment, for utility, to offer services, maybe to prevention of healthcare. Maybe you reward people with tokenization and try to prevent illness or maintain well-being, for example. So these are the kind of things we're thinking about. What does that token look like? How can it be used safely? And what would motivate patients to be in the metaverse? And so we're looking at the whole concept of the economy, as I mentioned before, about who want to be involved, how they get involved, how they might work with us to create that kind of ecosystem. I just thought I'd leave you the two last slides. And that was obviously a very quick summary of what I've been doing, but just a glimpse of things I think that are worth discussing. Just a preview, you're the first to see it. This is my new website, which will be launched hopefully over the weekend. And what you see is kind of my understanding of my work, where I am, but also to launch kind of my own metaverse. And we're working on that as we speak. So I'll launch that over the weekend, and it'll be very interactive and hopefully very futuristic in that sense. So that's been a real breeze through some of the ideas that I've been working on, sharing, thinking about, and also and still the challenges that still remain for all of us in this space. So yeah, hope you took something from that. And thank you very much.
Super fantastic. Absolutely. But I do have to say, after seeing this, because I come from India, Shafi, the selling the kidney to take something, it takes a whole other new meaning, like I'm gonna sell my kidney to do this. And now, like, the medical data, or, the formation of the data in 3D form that could become an asset, and selling that. It's a whole other meaning in the new world. Fantastic, super insightful. I think we should totally take questions, and I'm really, really glad that Alex is here, who probably has tons to discuss and say about everything that was presented with respect to the metaverse and the intersection of blockchain and NFT that is oftentimes dismissed, to be honest. Some of the major companies are actually taking positions against NFT and crypto and blockchain, which they will obviously change at some point. They're just being cautious, I guess. But Alex, any questions from you or anyone else? Questions for Dr. Hemant?
Maybe I'll defer after I introduce myself.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Then I'll go in with a question, maybe.
Yeah, please, Rachel.
A simple one.
In the interest of time, I'll just do a quick spiel for the FDA thing that we just went through. So please go ahead with your question.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm not a medical professional. I've never been to a medical school. I'm an engineer. And the image I have in my head is, for a conventional medical school, is that an oral surgeon, let's say, is working on something and students are crowded around them trying to see, and they can't see because the angle is not the same as the professor has. Would this technology be applicable? The remote case that you've talked about is the remote case, but for a conventional medical school, would this also be applicable?
Yeah, so I didn't share a lot of my other work and slides, it would take too long. But one of the things, you're absolutely right, if you look at historical perspectives, the operating theatre is called a theatre for a reason, right? In the UK, because people were crowded around in big rooms and trying to watch. They weren't seeing very much. Even at my own medical school, in the hospital, for example, when we have an operation being carried out, there's often 8, 10 students crowded around and they can't see a thing. And so we haven't really challenged that for decades, saying it's okay to be in an operating theatre for 8 to 10 hours standing around. And most students are kind of in that time are on their smartphones, on TikTok or whatever it is, right? And not engaged at all. So I thought we need to do better. So one of the things that powered me 10 years ago was to create remote learning with Google Glass, with smart technology, with VR, so that suddenly anyone around the world could access that same learning opportunity. For me, it meant that you could scale. Rather than having 1 or 2 people around you, people like sharing knowledge. It's kind of who we are as human beings. We like to share our knowledge on a wider scale and share experiences, and that's what medicine is all about. What if you can share that with many people, millions of people around the world? Is their way of doing that? That was always been my driver of scaling and democratizing. So absolutely, that's the way forward. So then you can experience anywhere you are on the smartphone, you can interact. When I did the first Google Glass operation, I shared stories. So 2014, I got Google Glass, did a live transmission of a live operation. It's cancer surgery. My students were on a beach in Bali or somewhere, on the electives, on their smartphone. And they were texting me messages on my glass. I could answer them in real time and answer them in real time. So they didn't need to be in my OR to get the same experience almost. So it just showed what's possible. And absolutely, I think medical schools, with the increased number of students through the medical schools at the moment, and lack of experience, these have shown of real value. And the thing we're seeing now is that truly, the true concept of telementoring and teleproctoring. So now for surgery, we're seeing examples where using smart technologies and telestration to be able to remotely train people, on robotics, on surgery, And of course, one of the things I do, I work with Vodafone, our telephone company, one of the providers, and I work as the ambassador for Connected to 5G Health. And we've actually launched a whole digital surgery program. We've connected theatres in part of the UK, for example, all connected, and you can do remote training from wherever you are. And those kind of companies are now doing really well, precipitated by the lack of opportunity during the pandemic. And so suddenly we're realizing that virtualization of care is in, and virtual learning and telemetry proctoring is something that we all need to aspire to improve the experiences of people around the world. So absolutely fundamental. That was one of the challenges I was trying to understand and to provide some sense of solutions for it.
I'm just really excited that we are involved with the kind of work, Dr. Ahmed, that you're involved in, because especially when you talk about data and then monetizing the data and the medical data and the money is involved, this is very, very kind of a fine line and a dangerous territory for some people. You could really manipulate people from that perspective, and that's why I'm kind of really glad that we exist, and now as a collective we exist, and that we can talk about these challenges.
And that's important, Kavi. I think one of the things you'll be doing is helping us navigate through this, and that's really important. The problem we have is this is one of my kind of bugbears. We know, look, we share data all the time, as you know, on Facebook and social media. We share things endlessly and people monetize us, okay? When it comes to patient data, suddenly there's a huge problem, right? We are really kind of scared of having a conversation and not confronting it.
Yes.
Our challenge is difficult. Let's just confront it.
Exactly.
Deal with speak to the patients, find out, okay, what is it that we can do? Do we give you options? I'll give a story, actually. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was at a big conference. I ran a big conference as well. And we had about 2,000 people in the audience, health tech innovation. I said to the audience, would you be happy to share your data, your personal data for improving outcomes and blah, blah. Everyone put their hand up. Virtually everyone is happy to share data to improve access and improve outcomes. But I said to them, okay, hands up those that would like to make money out of that data. Suddenly there's just chaos. Everyone was sure, because people hadn't asked the question, understood the problems. Let's have that conversation. Let's be adult about it and overcome it and then just move on. But we're stuck with a barrier here. No one wants to understand it or take it on as what it might mean. That means patient groups, people like yourselves, make a deal and then decide and then reiterate as we go on if we made mistakes or got it wrong. But we're just not facing the challenge, and that's been a problem for so long, which you, Kavya, are doing well to somehow, approach in the right way.
Exactly. And so this is perfect because at XRSI, the privacy safety framework, this is very question, which is rooted in identity, etc. as well, going to be discussed and is being discussed ongoing on Friday. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to save my spiel for later if there is time. Otherwise, I'll share a couple of those tidbits via email. But I really want to welcome Dr. Alex Gahana, and just over to you, Alex. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I promise to be brief, brilliant, and be gone. So thank you. Thank you, Ahmed. It's amazing what you showed. Obviously, I wear multiple hats. One of my hats is I'm an advisor to AI Medis. I actually had a 2-hour phone call with Michael earlier today. And so a lot of what you're hearing, Kavya, is in line with what I've been working on, and I would like to think that part of the tokenomic design of AI Medis is attributed to the work that I've been doing for years. I myself am an anesthesiologist for close to 30 years and a pain physician. I've built 6 pain centers all over the world, in Israel, in Japan, in Switzerland, and in the United States. So it's safe to say that I'm familiar with the global health system. I've always been interested in technology integration in the clinical workflow, specifically to immersive technologies. I was one of the first that worked in pain medicine with the work of Ramachandran on mirror neurons and phantom limb pain, and the fact that I was 16 years in the IDF. So that was some of the stuff that we did before it was even called VR, where we'd have these mirror boxes. And was one of the first that worked with firsthand and XR, applied VR and things of that sort. I got interested in decentralized technologies like federated learning, like blockchain around 2012, 13. I'm trying to think, Bitcoin was $176 at the time. And I really didn't understand what that was. I was a theme developer at the time for ARK Investment with Kathy Wood. And Chris Bernitsky was the blockchain analyst. And so we kind of dived in. It took me about 2 years to wrap my head around it. And then I wrote the book, Healthcare and Blockchain, a HIMSS publication, and became a industry leader in that. And that landed me a gig at the United Nations CFAC Commission and working with the European Commission and the European Union on GDPR aspects. Around 2000, I want to say in 18, 19, on the heels of Ebola, right before COVID started, a friend of mine from WHO said, hey, why aren't you doing all this in Africa? There's some really good folks there that are doing things. And so I got in touch with John Kamara in Nairobi, and we started to work now with Adanian Labs, and we're over 20 countries in Africa working on a whole host of decentralized technologies, understanding that you can't really talk about mental health and physical health without financial health. And so, we connected different solutions of not only health information exchange platforms, but also fintech solutions, education, women empowerment, agribiz, agri-fintech, and all of that. And about a year, I want to say a year and a half ago, a good friend of mine from Buenos Aires called me and said, Alex, why are you just spending time with these guys in Africa and not here in Latin America? So we started ACHA, the America's Continental Health Alliance, which is in a dozen countries, and we're kind of trying to mirror that work of creating DAOs and sub-DAOs and bringing together the whole concept of how do we work in a decentralized world that is not exposed to the, I would say, hyper-capitalist, extractive, rent-seeking economy that Ahmed, described. We met Kavya a few weeks ago on the NFT NYC, and I'm super stoked and excited by all the work that you're doing. I would say that specifically for healthcare, just so you get a sense of where my head is, and I'm sure that'll resonate with what you're all thinking, the essential problem is that citizens, or patients if you wish, are treated as health service consumers. That's it. So the more stuff you do, the better it is. The more tests, test for every pest, a pill for every ill, just doing stuff. And if I use blockchain parlance, we're trading in sick coins or in death coins. And as a pain doctor, if I ever had someone get well, my hospital administrator would say, what the hell are you doing? We lost now a paying customer. So the whole idea is to transform people from passive, hopeless and helpless consumers to active, helpful and hopeful producers, and not only producers of health, which you can argue that that's what Fitbit does and that's what all these wearables and things, but they're not wealth producers because there's no tokenomics behind the work. They're not included in the economic activity, and that's really what the eye opener, and also, as I'm seeing from you all nodding your head, is the center of resistance from the incumbents, because it's a power shift of suddenly, the default is, so how much do I owe? Absolutely nothing. And so I don't recall when 23andMe sold my data to GSK, I don't recall a check in the mail, and I don't recall my insurance sending me $25K because I didn't use OxyContin last year. So we're now moving from a patient-centric, I would say very patriarchal, well, I'm the doctor, I know best, but sure, we're going to do everything around you, to actually a patient-driven system. And so I think that's the missing component, the business model. That's why everything that the Ahmed show was fantastic. The virtual, the phygital, the digital, we get it. It's all generational. My daughter, my 16-year-old, doesn't understand how we have not done this until now. So that's not the issue. The real issue is how do we build behind it a sustainable, inclusive business model that is transparent, equitable, and fair. And that's why I start, with the global South, or I start, with emerging markets and developing economies, because there's no, incumbents and power structures that disallow it. And I'll just end by saying that the business model, the way I explain it here, is very simple. It is based on one part of it is consumption, and the second part is data asymmetry. So I know something that you don't know, so I'll let you know, but you'll have to pay a lot for it. So if I know after COVID where all the toilet paper is hiding or where the hand sanitizers, then go to my website, alex.toiletpaper, and then you'll pay, on every click $1,000, and I'm a rich man. So this data illiquidity is really a problem. And so we can go both ways. We can talk like I talk at the UN about data and rooted in human dignity, blah, 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 Article 2, or we can talk like I talk in New York about a business. How do we create an economy of abundance, not anymore the commodity economy where there's only so much of commodities, only so much gold, only so much uranium. So if you get one meal more, that means that I get one meal less, to an economy of abundance, of a network effect. Data is infinite. And so the more data we create, the more data we share, the more rails that we create back and forth, like, for example, the AI Metis ecosystem. And that's where my head is, and that's where I'm helping Michael and Ben, and hopefully I'll have more time to sit down with Ahmed, and go into specifics, is really build the tokenomics, the governance. How do you make sure that the community, and this is, Kavya, where you and I were talking about, that as our interactions are fueled by things that are not moralistically pure, but that it just really encourages good behavior and discourages really, really poor behavior. So we're transitioning from something which is an open market, which is like it's open to everyone, to producers, to non-producers, to anti-producers, to actually a free market, that it's free, but only if you contribute to that community. It's not democracy for anyone, including those who want to ruin democracy. It's democracy only for those who want to contribute and maintain it. And for those who don't, who want to threaten it, who want to pollute it, they are not part of it. So that's a few words about myself, and I'm just really super stoked to work with you guys, and looking forward to the future.
Amazing. Thank you, Alex. Alex, could you please also just quickly, because I think we have a very unique opportunity here to shift. I know today two things is, one is code for well-being. China has actually already rolled out some kind of a AI-based legal guidelines. It's a law that really shifts the mindset from like, hey, we don't need to code for engagement, you need to code for well-being, and they're going to reprimand the companies. So that's like one hope that I have there. But then the second hope I had when you said ESG-H. So like, if you could just a little bit elaborate, and I'm glad Janet is here, who's currently an acting co-chair with me on the private medical XR privacy safety framework. We've done a bit of an assessment of use cases, and we held back from publishing anything until we heard from FDA. And now I'm thinking, we have this unique opportunity to really use this, whatever publication will do, assessment, to really shift the mindset towards some of these points. So if you could elaborate the whole ESG edge, and I think you even mentioned you were educating Chuck Schumer a little bit, right? So that's how it got highlighted. If you could elaborate on that, that would be lovely.
Well, that's a fun story. I'll start with that because that's a fun story. I'm sure that you'll all kind of resonate, and it'll be 2 minutes, and then I'll answer your two questions. So I was invited to testify in front of the Senate Finance Committee during the Obama administration, end of it, it was around the opioid epidemic, and I was a pain specialist, and I worked in legislation around the opioids. And so Chuck, I asked me something to the extent of, how do you fix healthcare? And I asked him, how much do I have? Do I have 10 minutes, 5 minutes? He said, 2 minutes. He said, you have 90 seconds. I said, okay, then I'll do it in 30 seconds. And everybody's like leaning forward. How am I going to explain how to fix US healthcare in 30 seconds? So I said, but before I do that, I'm going to ask a question, which is not a trick question. What is the opposite of health? So he said the opposite of health is, I don't know, anybody want to chime in? The opposite of health is? Anybody? What do you think? Opposite of health is?
Disease.
Disease, correct. So disease, illness, whatnot. And I said, you see, that's correct, but because of you, now we have a disease management system and not a wellness system. And so what I want to argue for just 30 seconds is that the opposite of health is not disease. The opposite of health is isolation. That through disease and illness, we become isolated. And so if we agree, and we don't have to really be isolated, but we feel isolated. So if we agree that the opposite of health, for the sake of this conversation, is isolation, then the journey back to wellness is connectedness. It's to connect to our data, connect to our family, to our friends, to our faith, to our community, doesn't matter, but it's connectedness. And so any policy that you decide to do, you have to ask yourself, will it increase the connectedness of people or not? When I give people free OxyContin to do it, will that make them more connected to their environment? Or will they make them sit on the couch all day and pop pills all day long? And so I say, and the way I explain it, at the time she was 12 years old, I said, the way I explained to my 12-year-old is, if you take the I out of illness and replace it with we, what do we get? We get wellness. And that's really what this is all about, that even if we do it in a virtual medium, it's all about connecting. And it's the funification, the gamification. I always think of avatars as the front end of our self-sovereign identity. Because when you say self-sovereign identity, or you say QR codes or NFTs or hashes, people can't wrap their head around it. But when they look at an avatar or a hologram, they say, oh, that's me. And so you can attach to that me all that part. You can have an NFT, but it's that NFT looking like an ugly ape or an ugly, I don't know what now the goblins look like. It just looks like me, or a more handsome, hairful, slimmer version of me. Doesn't matter. But that's really the beauty of the digital or the virtual and the phygital. So that's kind of like that little story. But to answer about the China and the ESGH, it's actually connected to the same thing. The legal framework that we are now looking at health data is through the, I would say, glasses of privacy and security. And so obviously a country like China doesn't really like this idea of privacy. And a country like United States is obsessed with privacy, but doesn't really like security, because we have to, we have to give all our secrets to the NSA because they're going to save us from badness. So those frameworks of security and privacy are not helpful when you're negotiating with these regulators. And that's why the idea of looking at data as dignified labor, as part of you, it falls in to the work of, into the legal framework of property. So I am my actions, and my actions are my data. And so when a third party takes a piece of it and uses it, loses it, or abuses it, or I don't know what, with my permission, because on page 147 in font 3, it said I can give it and use it whatever I want, you're taking a piece of me. And this idea of servitude and slavery and post-colonialism, these are things that all over the world, for different historical reasons, resonate. And so it's way easier to talk about Chinese to the Chinese about property. And they respect that. And it's way easier to talk about, Magna Carta in Europe about property. It's way easier to talk about the United States of ownership, and I got a lot of stuff as property. Nobody likes eminent domain. Nobody likes when the army or the government comes in and seizes things. Doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but nobody likes it. So if we're able to start to think of data as property, which has renting and leasing and selling, and it's not all, it's pieces of it, the different personas. I am now selling you stuff, and I'm not getting any monetary gain from it, We're doing it because we all believe that we believe, this imaginary XRSI DAO that one day will kind of this, and I'll get eventually retroactive all these Kavya coins because I was amazing and blah, blah, blah. And every time I would talk, I would see another ping on my phone. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And so we capture the value of what we do. That's really what it's all about. And so the H is the addition in the corporate reporting. What's the corporate reporting? Show me that you're not whizzing in the river. Show me that you're not, throwing plastic out of that. Greenwash and say that I'm working with Kavya because she's amazing, and that'll give me a couple of brownie points. And nobody's talking about human capital. As if I'm nothing, as if I'm not part of this. And so when you say, no, you have to include the human activity as part of your capital, because if you have a company that's full of presenteeism and absenteeism, very different than a company that doesn't. And I'm not talking about some BS metrics that they're saying, I'm talking about real capturing of that value of the work. So if that, for example, company is a DAO, then you know who are the stakers and who are the whole. And so that's kind of the idea behind it, that we're not invisible. And it always reminds me working, in the hospital, I'm sure that Ahmed would relate to it, is I feel like the farmer who had a mule and the mule died. And he said, I'm so disappointed because last week I taught him how to work without water and food. So it's like, let's do more and more and more with less and less and less. And this is a different way of forcing companies to recognize that people have intrinsic value and they are part of the value. Hence, they are incented to invest in them because that increases their overall value.
Thank you so much. So would you say H is health or human capital in the ESG H?
Well, I call it health because that's how we have that value when we're healthy, when we're productive. Yeah. That's how we see that for a better word, wellness, or I don't think of it as a transactional way. That's why I don't call it human capital, because I think that there are, I would say, non-monetary elements to that, health that we are to our value. Yeah. But it just, the idea is it has to force you, like you have these different resources, the people in that, there are resources too that are not just for extraction, but also for investment.
So right away, that's why I wanted you to emphasize on this, because when we publish this recommendation, the use case, the medical XR baseline, the document for the framework, and Janet, I'm actually gonna share this with all of you. I propose that we make this as a key sort of pillar where we say, hey, XRSI proposes that what we have been doing risk assessment based on these, factors that we see as, hey, show us the ESG. We are in a unique position to actually drive that, what Alex has just said. And we can really build upon that various matrices, how to do this. And then what Shafi and Alex both talked about the data. We had a conversation with Tim Berners-Lee's liaison for Solid. Solid is a protocol that literally allows you to granularly yank the access if somebody's being malicious with your data. And so this protocol needs to be rooted first in identity. So the technical pieces that seem that like so far away, they are emerging. And we are kind of in collaboration and connection, and I see that it can be that word that we are, aspiring to build, because the technical pieces are there, this policy pieces are there, but it needs a major shifting of mindset. And we as a collective are in a perfect place, in a unique position to shift that. So Janet, I'm glad that you're here. We're totally going to work on these things and put it back in sort of writing to get approval from the council and then get granular with this. I'm so happy that both of you are here to help shift that mindset. It's going to take all of us. Any other comments? I know we are on time. Rachel, we found our word. You hate the wellness type of thing. It's health. We're going to use health. So not just wellness, which seems a bit of fluffy word. Any other comments, or I think we're over time a minute.
Yes, we are over time, so we will address the announcements in the email and the follow-up email that we will send. There are a couple of announcements and a couple of things we didn't get to today, but
yeah,
you know, we've enjoyed this very much.
For anyone, Alex or Shafi or anyone else who hasn't seen, we just quickly, I want to share this YouTube. We made the recommendations to FDA as a council, and it was very data centric. Afterwards, there was a hour, 2 hours back and forth Q&A with several contributors, and it turned out to be a very good place to be because nobody else was really talking about privacy safety. So if you have time, it's a 5 minutes video that I made on behalf of the council, but there is a lot more to be done. And if we don't, then I don't feel like anybody else is coming, not with this intention, not with this exact core belief. It's like we have to code for wellness and we can do it, not for engagement. Thank you, everybody, and hope to see you next month.
Actually, we will, August is such a vacation month in Europe that probably there's no
meeting. Yeah,
there's no meeting, and then we'll see everybody in September.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
summer.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Great meeting you.
Thank you.